Frank Owen Gehry, CC, the 28th of February 1929, is a Canadian-born American architect, residing in Los Angeles. A number of his buildings, including his private residence, have become world-renowned attractions. His works are cited as being among the most important works of contemporary architecture in the 2010 World Architecture Survey, which led Vanity Fair to label him as the most important architect of our age. Gehry's best-known works include the titanium-clad Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain, Walt Disney Concert Hall in downtown Los Angeles, Louis Vuitton Foundation in Paris, France, Mitre and Maria Stata Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the Vance Center for Molecular Studies on the University of Cincinnati campus, Experience Music Project in Seattle, New World Center in Miami Beach, Weissman Art Museum in Minneapolis, Dancing House in Prague, the Vitra Design Museum and the Museum Martyr Herford in Germany, the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto, the Cinémathèque Française in Paris, and 8 Spruce Street in New York City. It was his private residence in Santa Monica, California, that jump-started his career. Gehry is also the designer of the future National Dwight D. Eisenhower Memorial. Early life. Gehry was born Frank Owen Goldberg on February 28, 1929, in Toronto, Ontario, to parents Erwin and Thelma Goldberg. His parents were Polish Jews who had immigrated to Canada prior to World War II. A creative child, he was encouraged by his grandmother, with whom he would build little cities out of scraps of wood. With these scraps from her husband's hardware store, she entertained him for hours, building imaginary houses and futuristic cities on the living room floor. His use of corrugated steel, chain-link fencing, unpainted plywood and other utilitarian or everyday materials was partly inspired by spending Saturday mornings at his grandfather's hardware store. He would spend time drawing with his father, while his mother introduced him to the world of art. So the creative genes were there, Gehry says. But my father thought I was a dreamer. I wasn't gonna amount to anything. It was my mother who thought I was just reticent to do things. She would push me. He was given the Hebrew name Ephraim by his grandfather, but only used it at his bar mitzvah. Education. In 1947, his family immigrated to the United States, settling in California, and changed their surname to Gehry. Gehry got a job driving a delivery truck, and studied at Los Angeles City College, eventually to graduate from the University of Southern California's School of Architecture. During that time, he became a member of Alpha Epsilon Pi. According to Gehry, I was a truck driver in LA, going to City College, and I tried radio announcing, which I wasn't very good at. I tried chemical engineering, which I wasn't very good at and didn't like, and then I remembered. Somehow I just started racking my brain about, what do I like, where was I, what made me excited, and I remembered art, that I loved going to museums and I loved looking at paintings, loved listening to music. Those things came from my mother, who took me to concerts and museums. I remembered Grandma and the blocks, and just on a hunch, I tried some architecture classes. Gehry graduated at the top of his class with a Bachelor of Architecture degree from USC in 1954. In the fall of 1956, he moved his family to Cambridge, where he studied city planning at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. He left before completing the program, disheartened and underwhelmed. Gehry's left-wing ideas about socially responsible architecture were under-realized, and the final straw occurred when he sat in on a discussion of one professor's secret project in progress, a palace that he was designing for right-wing Cuban dictator Fulgencio Battisti. Career. In 1961, he moved to Paris, where he worked for architects Pereira and Lichtman. In 1962, Gehry established a practice in Los Angeles with another architect, which became Frank Gehry and Associates in 1967, and then Gehry Partners in 2001. Gehry's earliest commissions were all in Southern California. where he designed a number of innovative commercial structures such as Santa Monica Place and residential buildings such as the eccentric Norton House in Venice, California. Among these works, however, Gehry's most notable design may be the renovation of his own Santa Monica residence. Originally built in 1920 and purchased by Gehry in 1977. The Gehry residence features a metallic exterior wrapped around the original building that leaves many of the original details visible. Gehry still resides there today. Other completed buildings designed by Gehry during the 1980s include the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium in San Pedro and the Air and Space Exhibit building at the California Museum of Science and Industry in Los Angeles. In 1989, Gehry was awarded the Pritzker Architecture Prize. The jury cited Gehry as always open to experimentation. He has as well a sureness and maturity that resists, in the same way that Picasso did, being bound either by critical acceptance or his successes. His buildings are juxtaposed collages of spaces and materials that make users appreciative of both the theater and the backstage. Simultaneously revealed, though Gehry continued to design other notable buildings in California such as the Chiat-Day building in Venice in collaboration with Klaus Oldenburg, which is well known for its massive sculpture of binoculars. He also began to receive larger national and international commissions. These include Gehry's first European commission, the Vitra International Furniture Manufacturing Facility and Design Museum in Germany, completed in 1989. This was soon followed by other major commissions including the Frederick Weissman Museum of Art in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the Cinémathèque Française in Paris, France, and the Dancing House in Prague, Czech Republic. In 1997, Gehry vaulted to a new level of international acclaim when the Guggenheim Museum Bilbao opened in Bilbao, Spain. Hailed by New Yorker magazine as a masterpiece of the 20th century, and legendary architect Philip Johnson as the greatest building of our time, the museum became famous for its striking yet aesthetically pleasing design and the economic effect that it had on the city. Since then, Gehry has regularly won major commissions and has further established himself as one of the world's most notable architects. His best-received works include several concert halls for classical music, such as the boisterous and curvaceous Walt Disney Concert Hall in downtown Los Angeles, which has been the centerpiece of the neighborhood's revitalization and has been labeled by the LA Times as the most effective answer to doubters, naysayers, and grumbling critics an American architect has ever produced. The open-air J. Pritzker Pavilion adjacent to Millennium Park in Chicago, and the understated New World Center in Miami Beach, which the LA Times called a piece of architecture that dares you to underestimate it or write it off at first glance. Other notable works include academic buildings such as the Stata Center at MIT and the Peter B. Lewis Library at Princeton University, museums such as the EMP Museum in Seattle, Washington, commercial buildings such as the IAC building in New York City, and residential buildings such as Gehry's first skyscraper, the Beekman Tower at 8 Spruce Street in New York City. Several recent and ongoing major works by Gehry around the world include the Dr. Chow Chak Wing in the University of Technology, Sydney, completed in 2014. The Chow Chak Wing, with its 320,000 bricks in sweeping lines, is described as 10 out of 10 on a scale of difficulty. An ongoing project is the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi on Saadiyat Island in the United Arab Emirates. Other significant projects such as the Mirvish Towers in Toronto, and a multi-decade renovation of the Philadelphia Museum of Art are currently in the design stage. In October 2013, Gehry was appointed joint architect with Foster Plus Partners to design the High Street phase of the development of Battersea Power Station in London, England, which will represent Gehry's first project in London. However, in recent years, some of Gehry's more prominent designs have failed to go forward. In addition to unrealized designs such as a major Corcoran Art Gallery expansion in Washington, D.C., and a new Guggenheim Museum near the South Street Seaport in New York City, Gehry was notoriously dropped by developer Bruce Ratner from the Pacific Park redevelopment project and was also fired in 2014 as the designer of the World Trade Center Performing Arts Center. Both of these projects were in New York City. That said, some stalled projects have recently shown progress. After many years and a dismissal, Gehry was recently reinstated as architect for the Grand Avenue project in Los Angeles, and though Gehry's controversial design of the National Dwight D. Eisenhower Memorial in Washington, D.C., has been subject to numerous delays during the approval process with the United States Congress, the project was finally approved in 2014 with a modified design. In 2014, two significant, long-awaited museums designed by Gehry opened: the Biomuseo, a biodiversity museum in Panama City, Panama, and the Fondation Louis Vuitton, a modern art museum in the Bois de Boulogne Park in Paris, France, which opened to some rave reviews. In February 2015, the new building for the University of Technology, Sydney was officially opened, with a facade constructed from more than 320,000 hand-placed bricks and glass slabs, and costing $180 million. Gehry said he would never again design a building quite like the crumpled paper bag. In 2014, Gehry was commissioned by the LA River Revitalization Corp., a non-profit group founded by the city in 2009 to coordinate river policy, to devise a wide-ranging new plan for the river architectural style. Much of Gehry's work reflects a spirit of experimentation coupled with a respect for the demands of professional practice. Gehry's work has remained largely unaligned with broader stylistic tendencies or movements, with his earliest educational influences rooted in modernism. Gehry's work has sought to escape modernist stylistic tropes while still remaining interested in some of its underlying transformative agendas. Continually working between given circumstances and unanticipated materializations, Gehry's style works to disrupt expectations. Gehry is sometimes associated with what is known as the Los Angeles School, or the Santa Monica School of Architecture. The appropriateness of this designation and the existence of such a school, however, remains controversial due to the lack of a unifying philosophy or theory. This designation stems from the Los Angeles area's producing a group of the most influential postmodern architects, including such notable Gehry contemporaries as Eric Owen Moss and Pritzker Prize winner Tom Main of Morphosis, as well as the famous schools of architecture at the Southern California Institute of Architecture, UCLA, and USC, where Gehry is a member of the board of directors. Gehry's style at times seems unfinished or even crude, but his work is consistent with the California funk art movement in the 1960s and early 1970s, which featured the use of inexpensive found objects and non-traditional media such as clay to make serious art. Gehry has been called the apostle of chain-link fencing and corrugated metal siding. However, a retrospective exhibit at New York's Whitney Museum in 1988 revealed that he is also a sophisticated classical artist, who knows European art history and contemporary sculpture and painting. Dr. Chow Chak Wing Building 2015. The Experience Music Project in Seattle. Walt Disney Concert Hall. Dancing House in Prague. Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto, Canada. Fish sculpture located in front of the Port Olympic, in Barcelona, Catalonia, Spain. Gallery of African American Art, or O'Keeffe Museum of Art Campus located in Biloxi, Mississippi. Hotel Marqués de Riscal in El Chiego, Spain. Louis Vuitton Foundation in Paris. Bilbao Effects. After the colossal success of Gehry's design for the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain, critics began referring to the economic and cultural revitalization of cities through iconic, innovative architecture as the Bilbao effect. In the first 12 months after the museum was opened, an estimated $160 million were added to the Basque economy. In subsequent years there have been many attempts to replicate this effect through large-scale eye-catching architectural commissions that have been both successful and unsuccessful, such as Daniel Libeskine's expansion of the Denver Art Museum and buildings by Gehry himself, such as the almost universally well-received Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles and the more controversial EMP Museum in Seattle. Though some link the concept of the Bilbao effect to the notion of starchitecture, Gehry has consistently rejected the label of a starchitect. Criticism. Though much of Gehry's work has been well received, reception of Gehry's work is not always positive. Art historian Hal Foster reads Gehry's architecture as, primarily, in the service of corporate branding. Criticism of his work includes complaints that the buildings waste structural resources by creating functionless forms, do not seem to belong in their surroundings, and are apparently designed without accounting for the local climate.